All right, me be the market expert. And I guess the first thing that kind of caught my eye today was the unemployment rate by state in April 2024. And so a couple months back, and most everything that we do is rear view facing data, right? I mean, they're having to go and extrapolate it and then massage the numbers, if you will, and kind of go through there. But it's kind of interesting looking at Colorado, right? We're at 3.7% unemployment, and the very what's important about this data is this is truly what's controlling the Fed at this point. And so what's interesting about unemployment is a couple factors. Firstly, they have to be able to work, right? They have to be like in a working age, like they're not taking people that, are on so welfare or disability or anything like that. They're taking that they're able-bodied to work and within an age bracket that can work, and that they had to have been looking for a job for at least the last 4 weeks, right? So for the last 4 weeks, they've kind of been looking for some kind of employment. So Colorado, we're sitting at 3.7. And as we're looking at this thing, we can see that the unemployment's very, very low. And I think that if we were to look at the data, I think that they survey about 60,000 people per state. I think is kind of what that looks like. I think that's their model that they're running. So they're going through, and these are obviously the people that we know that they come and knock on the door and they do the census and they do all the different surveys. And so 3.7% of Coloradans are unemployed. And this is very, very low. And what the Fed's looking to do before they start moving stuff around is they want to see this number start going up. Inflation data is coming down. And we've seen that the inflation data is coming down, but these are kind of the numbers that they're hiding behind right now. They want to see all these yellows start to turn blue. And once we start seeing these numbers go up more and more, that's when they're going to start having conversations about dropping rates, even though they've already said that there might be a rate cut or two on the table. Like they're saying that it's on the table for discussion. Well, that's still not solidified yet. This is truly what is going to dictate a lot of that. Jumping into the second thing, looking at here, this is also kind of interesting that came through. This is institutional home buying remains constrained. And it says, just look at this chart. So they're going through, and let's see if I can enlarge this a little bit. You guys over. So here it is. So what we're looking at, this is how many single family homes institutionals bought in May of 2024. So institutional buyers, and this is groups owning at least 1,000 homes. So that's what is setting this demographic of buyers is they have to own at least 1,000 properties. This blue is what they've acquired in May, and then the yellow is how much they've sold. So if we're looking at this thing, looks like Las Vegas, Nevada is the big one, followed by Atlanta, kind of going through. But Colorado, here's Denver. So if we're looking at this thing, this is a net negative in the sense to where institutional investors are actually selling more of their properties than buying in Denver right now. And so you can kind of see that delta. Here's your 50 and here's your 50. And so while it's not, flat zero, they've probably sold what 5 to 10 more houses than they've bought this year. Then we look at Colorado Springs. Again, they sold more than they've bought. And that's really it for Colorado. And so these are the 50 markets with the most institutional activity in May. So if we're looking at this thing, while we see that our numbers are pretty low, we can actually see that we actually have a lot of traffic for institutional buyers and sellers, investors, if you will. And that's why we've kind of made this list is that investors are still coming to Colorado and they're still purchasing and they're selling and we have a good market for them. So here's another interesting one, and we're going through this from June 12th. So this is last week, and this is by Logan Moshami, right? And so this is who the data that we look at a lot in this call. And it says, should we be worried about the number of underwater homes? And the reason why this is getting so much play is because it made it on CNBC and it made it on CNN, and they just did this big uh, article around underwater homes and why it's an issue. But here's the chart. which is kind of interesting. So we have LTV, right? Loan to value ratio. We can kind of see this. This is 50 to 54. This is 99% loan to value ratio, this very small one right here. And then we have negative equity. So if we were to look at this thing, so percentage of loans, we have 9% of all loans out there have, 50, 54% loan to value ratio, and they're going through it. So approximately 1 million homes, most borrowers have more than 50% loan to value ratio. So we're looking at this thing, and so the line isn't showing the people that have more than 50% equity in their house. That's what this is showing. Like on this other side of this equation over here, these are the people that have more than 50% equity. These are the people that have more loan to value, right? These are the people with bigger mortgages. And this side, which they're not showing right now, are the people that actually own more than 50% of their house, have less than 50% of a loan out on their property. So very, very small numbers. And I think it's very important that we know this, right? Again, like I keep going back to this, but this is the big short, right? This is that conversation where, 2008, right? Where we're talking about how these homes are underwater and how this housing bubble and all these different things. Here is the data. And I think this is very, very important stuff. Like we actually have to be able to know this. We actually have to be able to have some conversations around this. So what a difference a cycle makes. We only have 1.8% of homes with underwater mortgages, and roughly 40% of all homes in America don't even have a mortgage. I mean, think about that. That is huge. 40% of all homes in the United States of America don't have a mortgage. And that's big, right? Like that's huge as we're thinking about this. So we're going through, these are the things that we need to be able to have a conversation with. This is high credit scores dominate mortgages now. And so this is why everything is so different. When we're talking about the demographic of homeowners in the United States, if we go back to The Big Short and we were just even think of the movie, there was this part in the movie where I'm going to use the title gig worker. There was a gig worker that went out and got like three different houses. And this person did not make enough money to support three different mortgages. And this is where that term zombie foreclosure came from. So the zombie foreclosure, this person didn't have enough money to come through. They didn't have the credit score that was necessary to go do this. This was back in a time where if you could fog a mirror, you could get a mortgage and you could go get a property. And these bankers were incentivized to get as many houses, sold. And so that's what they were doing. They were now this money to go loan to go buy houses. And these zombie foreclosures started popping up because what was happening was they were leaving these houses vacant. They weren't living in them. They weren't using them as vacation rentals. They weren't doing them as long-term rentals. They weren't doing anything. They were just sitting there. They were just empty houses with nothing happening in them. Now, if we were to look, and this is Q1 2024, 82% of all loans, the credit score of those people have above a 720 credit score. I mean, think about that. These are super well qualified buyers that obviously take some kind of pride in their credit scores, and they're not doing different things to hurt this. So also a very interesting graph, like as we're looking at this, is 2003, 2004, 5, right? So we're seeing 05 to 2024. We're seeing a very, very strong demographic. So Becca says, I'm not sure how accurate it is, but after last week's BTME, I looked up how many homes in the US were owner occupied, and it's something like 86 million. So 85 million homes have equity. Out of that, yeah, it does match what the media says. It doesn't match what the media says at all. Yeah, this is the thing when we're talking about what the media is saying, and we know the more negative the headline, that's what sells, and that's what gets people's attention. And they're going through it, and we also have to keep in mind that they're listening to non-experts as they're going through and they're doing their research as well. So kind of interesting. So foreclosures and new bankruptcies are still below pre-pandemic level. So also be thinking about that, right? Like as we're looking at this thing, here we are. we're living over here, Q1 2024. Look at what this looks like. Foreclosure and new bankruptcy at still lower than pre-pandemic levels. Only 44,000 foreclosures started in Q1 2024. Nationwide, 44,000 foreclosures. Guys, that is such a minor demographic of people. And we have to keep in mind that what states are these occurring in? This isn't Colorado. Yes, we do have some foreclosures. Absolutely, we do. But this is going to be in different areas like Louisiana, which I feel like I pick on every week. And it's going to be more of those like Sun Belt kind of areas in there and places that are truly hit by crime, as well as big disruptive weather patterns, right? So when we're talking about Louisiana, they have a higher crime rate, as well as they're getting hit with a bunch of natural disasters. So it's way harder to get insurance out there. There is less people wanting to purchase houses. They are probably on the lower end of the credit scores. And so as we're going through, when we start seeing these numbers, this 44,000, this number does not accurately represent our market in the United States. This is, or in Colorado, this is a macro level. Only 44,000 total homes in the United States that are in foreclosure or started the process, not even in the foreclosure, started the process. But here we go, right? So can mortgage rates keep falling? Job market data is key. So we're not worried about inflation anymore, right? So that's the big thing. Like in the beginning of all this, we were looking at inflation and we were looking at jobs. Now we've been seeing the inflation data come down. Inflation data, everything is coming down, even though the price of eggs is still astronomical right now for anyone that's trying to buy eggs recently. And so when we're looking at these numbers, what the Fed is truly doing at this point is they are saying we're not going to lower rates until the job market breaks. Like that's what they're looking for. They can't say that. They can't say we're waiting for people to lose jobs before we drop rates, but that's kind of what they're implying. So since May 29, we've witnessed a decline in the 10-year yield, which has been favorable for mortgage rates. The critical question is, can this trend persist? Clues from the recent Fed meeting and the softening inflation data hit a potential continuation. If the labor data gets softer, how is this affecting this week's housing data? And let's dive into it. So as we're looking, we're not going to talk about the 10-year yield. We're not going to go there. We're not going to talk about the spreads, right? We do know there's a correlation between the yield and mortgage data. But let's jump into purchase applications. Last week, we had the second best week to week purchase application data percentage print as mortgage rates had fallen recently. So guys, this is interesting. All right. So a couple things, like as we're looking at this thing, we can see we were living down here. This is in the crawl space. Like this line right here, this is the basement. We've been in the crawl space and like we just got some air. We just like went above the crawl space. We're in the basement right now. And so purchase application data did tick up. Now, this isn't something that we should be super excited about. Like we should be able to have a conversation around it. But these are such low numbers that any positive movement like looks great. Isn't super exciting. But I think what's interesting is this. As we're going through and we're seeing potential numbers start going down, I think that there should be an exercise that we should all be doing. We know that we all have buyers on the fence, right? And that we all have a pipeline, we have a database. And what would it look like if you're going through and you're talking to your buyers? These buyers are on the fence. Like they've told you, we've been looking to buy, but interest rates are too high. What would it look like? And I'm picturing like back in the day, and we haven't seen this recently just because I don't think that we've seen anyone inside of a brokerage with this. But let's think about, I'm going to go with Debbie. And because she can hear me, and so she's top of mind. So I'm thinking about Debbie's office back at the old building, and she had her wall, right? These are her buyers, these are her sellers, and it was like their timelines on when they were going to be moving, if they were active, if they were under contract, and like, right? It was just this visual representation of what her pipeline was doing. Now, what if we were to change our pipeline? And what if our pipeline looked like we were going through and we just had, oh, these are all my buyers that set at 5.5 interest. This is when they would be willing to buy. At 6% interest rates. They said that they would be willing to buy it. What if we were to do that? Like we're having the conversation, someone's like, I'm waiting for interest rates to drop. And you're like, awesome. At what percentage does that make sense for you to become a buyer? All right. Like if we're having that conversation with people and we're figuring out, hey, these are my 6% buyers. These are my 5.5% buyers. These are my 6.5% buyers. And we're going through and we're just tallying them, we're listing them. And as we're going through and we're watching this, because there's some indication that these rates could start falling. If anyone was on Coffee Talk the other day, even Mitch said it, right? Like Mitch said, like, hey, we could start seeing rates go down just depending on the data and how comfortable banks feel, because banks don't necessarily have to be in line with the Fed. That's because that 10-year yield and mortgage rates, as they're getting closer, that's good, but they don't necessarily need to correlate like that. So what if our pipeline said, here's my 6, here's my 6.5, here's my 5.5, and we're putting all this data together, we're watching the data lines, we're watching what interest rates do, so that we know that we can go in and get some locked in people at these percentages when they fall to their comfort level. Weekly housing inventory data, right? Like we're going through here and we're looking at this thing and it says weekly inventory change. So inventory rose from 611 to 620. This time last year, it went from 443 to 451. All-time inventory bottom in 2022, 240,000. So we're nowhere near that number, thankfully. And the peak inventory of 2024, surprise, we're here, right? Like we're seeing more homes hit the market. We're seeing more motivated people listing their houses, and we're seeing interest rates slow down purchases. This is just what we're looking at. And it says, for some context, active listings for the week of 2015, this week 2015, 1.1 million homes. So we're nowhere near that number, but this is a good thing. We're seeing more houses. And so as we're seeing more houses hit the market and we're seeing interest rates start to trickle down a little bit, we're going to start to see more movement. We're going to see more people be more comfortable, willing to raise their hand and go to pursue some houses. And this is what we need. The adverse to this, if we were looking at this 240,000, like if this is the inventory level that we were at, we started seeing more homes, or we started to seeing, I'm sorry, the interest rates drop, and we only had 240,000 homes on the market. That's when we get back into 2021. Like if anyone can realize, like that's why 2021 looked the way that it did, was there was not enough supply. There wasn't enough supply hitting the market for the demand with the interest rates where they are. So we need to see more and more houses keep coming on the market, more and more houses sitting a little bit, because as interest rates start to come down, that means there's more options. And that is a more healthy market that we've been in the past. Like while this has been a zero fund market, we are in a recession as far as housing goes. We need more homes on the market to make it less competitive. We're looking at this thing. Here's just your visual representation. This is good. We want to see this. We want to see this keep climbing. Here's 2021, guys. And this is what I was saying. 2021, this is why it looked the way that it did. There was no inventory. This is why home prices increased as much as they did, because interest rates were down, as well as inventory was down. Demand was all the way up here. And so that's why we started seeing these bidding wars, $100,000 over asking. Here's my firstborn child, no contingencies. The more inventory we have, the interest rates start going down. We're not going to see as many bidding wars, and it's not going to be as painful as it was in 2021. New listing data, we can see this. We're climbing. Not as high as it was in 2022. And keep in mind, 2022 was, we were sleeping behind the wheel. We had people listing their houses, and then interest rates started climbing and homes sat. So we had inventory. New listings data, this is kind of what this is looking like. Price cut percentages, we're sitting at 36% year to date. We know historically speaking, 33%, 1/3 of all homes have a price decrease. And in 2024, we're sitting at 36%. So we're right there. And you can see it, here we are. We're still higher than we were in 2023 and 2022. Historically speaking, we're right on line though. Pending home sales, this is kind of an interesting number. So they're starting to track this over the last couple of weeks, how many homes are sitting in the pending status. which is kind of neat. So we look at this thing and it's more homes pending than it was in 2023, but not as many as it was in 2022. But we need to keep in mind it's dependent on mortgage rates. So as the mortgage rates are going down, we can expect to see this number keep climbing. And so this will be a very interesting number to kind of watch. Not week over week, but month over month going forward. We should start to see this number start climbing as interest rates keep going down. So week ahead, existing home sales, housing starts, retail sales, and Fed speeches. This week, we will get some economic data. Retail sales will be essential data line from the Fed. We will also get housing starts, and it will be interesting to see if we continue the downtrend in single family and multifamily permits. So keep in mind, like, money is so expensive now that builders are not borrowing as much of it to keep building. And so that's why these permits are down. We're seeing single family and multifamily permits go down. Yes, we're seeing some building in Colorado, right? Like we still go, I'm actually surprised every time I see like a new start. But nationally speaking, we can go through and we can see that single family and multifamily permits have gone down, and it's because the cost of money is so expensive. And then we're looking at this thing, interest rates were at 6.86% for a conforming loan. And then for an FHA, we're at 6.6. Let's get rid of this jumbo. But here we go. I just put it in the last month. We have 1 month worth of data. Nope, hold on. We don't want 1 month. Let's do this. Here's just June. Here's where we've been. So if anyone's just kind of looking at some of the data lines, this is how we started the month, 7% and 6.7. And this is where we are right now, 6.8 and 6.6. So it is coming down. And this is truly what we want to see. We want to see these interest rates keep going down more and more. But at the same time, we need inventory to keep going up, because if interest rates get to a point where more people start raising their hand, they're super excited, and there's no properties, it's 2021 all over again. And we're going to start seeing headlines where homeowners have or home buyers have cried at least once during the transaction, which was a Zillow report back in 2021. Arvada, if we were to look at it, just like we always do, Altos data, 725, we're pretty much in line, not a whole lot of movement. Median price of new homes, it's gone up a little bit, but still really no movement per square foot. So our price per square foot has continued to go down, which interesting, not anything really to write home about. Average days on market and median days. Again, these are very important data lines as we're looking at, and these are for the conversations that we're having with our home sellers. Home sellers average days on market 42. If we don't price our home right, 21 is the median. After we work the data lines in, we can expect to be at 21 if we price it aggressively and we look at what is happening in the neighborhood, and those are our competition. Price decrease is 42%. So we just looked at this, right? Like we looked at and we started talking about, nationally speaking, we're at 36% of price cuts. Well, in Arvada, we're at 42%. So that tells me that we have a lot of overpriced houses. We have agents that are not educating their buyers. Their sellers, and that's why we're seeing these price decreases happening. And so again, we need to be figuring out what the motivation is. Is it money? Is it time? Is it both? What is their end destination? When do they need to be there? What's drawing them? And we're going through and we're figuring out what their motivations are. And that should be dictating their price, not what their neighbors got back in 2021 based off of Zillow. 2% price increases, guys. This just goes to show, like we were just talking about, less and less new build permits. 2%. Like this is stage 2. This is stage 3. These are new builds coming onto the market. 2%, very low number. You can actually see it is dropping here. Relisted homes, 4%, also dropping. But again, we have buyers that are more discerning than ever. Median rent has gone down $2,998, and you can see that our market is less of the seller's market than it was last month. And again, we know this because seasonality. Seasonality is something that we have in Colorado. We've kind of left the home buying season, if you will. It's the summer, hence why there's 3 of us on this call today. right? Like people are doing summer activities. They're not thinking about truly rushing out and buying houses unless it was on their to do list. So seasonality is definitely a big part of everything that is happening.